Hello friends, welcome back to the lectures of Engineering Thermodynamics. In the last lecture we have seen thermodynamic state, what is thermodynamic process, what are the cyclic processes, non-cyclic processes, what is the condition which governs whether the process is a cyclic or non-cyclic. And in this lecture we are going to study Joule's experiment, then the first law of thermodynamics and some of the corollaries of first law of thermodynamics. So let's begin with the Joule's experiment. Earlier it was considered that heat as not a kind of energy. It was considered as a kind of a fluid which is colorless, which is massless, which is odorless, and that fluid flows from a high temperature body to the low temperature body. That fluid is named as a calorie. Calories flows from a high temperature body to a low temperature body. It was the James Prescott Joule who first of all proposed the concept and proved that heat is not a kind of a fluid, but it is a kind of an energy. Heat is a kind of energy. It has the same unit and dimensions as that of the energy. Perhaps heat can be converted into some other forms of energy, and all other forms of energy can be converted into the heat energy. So that he proved this concept with the aid of one experiment. We say it as the Joule's experiment. So let's see what is that Joule's experiment. What he did is, he took one insulated chamber. So this is the insulated chamber provided with certain insulation, and he filled some water into it, and he kept one more chamber inside it which is made up of conducting material, and inside it again he filled some water over here, right? One shaft is inserted through a hole which contains a blower, and that is kept into the inner cylinder, and the shaft is connected to a pulley at the top, at the outer surface, and a thread is wound, or say rope is wound over that pulley, and that is taken aside, and here there is one more pulley over here, and from this pulley he attached one weight over here, a certain given weight. So this is the ground level, and he allowed that weight to fall down with uniform velocity by a distance h, and finally that weight comes down over here. So it's not here, this level, right? Now in this one, this is the insulated chamber, so that there is no transfer of heat takes place from inner water to the outer surrounding, nor from outer surrounding to the inner water. He attached one thermometer over here, this thermometer can take down the reading. This is the thermometer. Perhaps you can have one more thermometer over here also. This is completely filled by water. This is water. This entire region is water. Now this is what the experimental setup. Let me explain what it is. He took one insulated chamber, he filled some water into it. He took one more chamber which is conducting one and carrying some water. He kept a blower inside it, and the blower is attached to a shaft which comes out of both the chamber, and it is attached to a pulley. The pulley carries a wire or a rope wounded over it, and one end is fixed to the pulley and second end is taken out, and it is passed over another frictionless pulley and attached to a mass. This mass is mass m, and that mass is allowed to fall down with uniform speed, and that to minimum possible speed. It is allowed to fall down by a distance of h. He has kept one thermometer over here to measure the temperature of this water. He has kept one thermometer over here to measure the temperature of this water, right? Now what he did is he allowed, now this is what the experimental setup. Now the procedure he followed is that he allowed that mass to fall down with uniform speed by a distance of h, so that the potential energy of this mass reduces by a certain amount. How much is the amount? The change in the potential energy. Obviously the potential energy of this object, this mass m at the height h above the ground level, this is the ground level, the datum level from which we are going to take down the potential head. So this mass has the potential energy over here as equals to the potential energy of that mass at here is equals to, I will say, mgh, whereas the potential energy of this mass at this place is equal to potential energy at this place is equal to 0. Now as the mass is falling down, it loses its potential energy. How much is the loss in the potential energy? So potential loss in the potential energy is equal to mgh, and that is nothing but what? I mean, where does that potential energy goes then? That potential energy is get converted into the mechanical work. As we know, the law of conservation of energy, energy can neither be created nor it can be destroyed, but it can be only converted from one form into another form. Now as this object is losing its potential energy, it means that there must be conversion of that potential energy into some other form of energy, and which is that, I will say in this case it is the mechanical work. Since this mass is attached to a rope and rope is finally connected to a pulley, wound over the pulley, so it will start to rotate this rope, I mean starts to rotate the pulley as well as the shaft. So shaft is rotating, shaft is attached to a blower over here, the blower will rotate, this blower will keep on rotating, and as the blower is rotating, it will stir up the water inside that chamber. So finally the potential energy that this object had, that potential energy is get converted into the mechanical work, and mechanical work is finally transmitted to this water. He repeated this experiment again and again, I mean continuously number of times, like n number of times he allowed that mass to fall down by a distance h. So the total loss of potential energy he calculated it as mgh multiplied by the number of repetition, that is n. So that is what the total loss of potential energy of this object, and it has to be equals to the total work done transferred to this pulley and this stirrer arrangement. So let us say W is the total work done transferred. Then he found that the temperature of this water increases. As the temperature of this water increases, that water will transfer its heat to the surrounding, say that is Q, surrounding water. Now here we are having one more thermometer which can measure the initial temperature of this water and the final temperature of the water. So we know the mass of this water, we know the initial temperature of water, final temperature of water, and also the specific heat of water at constant pressure. So we can find out how much is the heat transferred by this object to the surrounding water. See, here we are losing, we have started from here, perhaps James Joule started from here. He allowed some mass to fall down by a certain distance h or a certain height h, vertical height, and that too with constant speed. That is very important, constant speed. Falling of this object has to be with constant speed, otherwise whatever the total potential energy that object has, it is not necessary that all of that energies get converted into the mechanical work. If it is falling down with certain acceleration, then some part of that potential energy will get converted into the kinetic energy of the object and will not get converted totally into the mechanical work. So this condition is important. This object has to fall down with constant or say uniform speed, and that too as minimum as possible. Then we can consider that all of its potential energies get converted into the mechanical work. That mechanical work is given to this water finally, and as that mechanical work is given to the water, it is found that the temperature of water is get increased. So temperature of water is get increased, it means what? There is increase in the energy level of this water, but by how much amount? For to calculate that, he absorbed that water, the surrounding water absorbs that heat from the inner chamber. Still its temperature comes back to the original temperature. Now this value Q we can find out by measuring the mass of the water, initial and final temperature of the water. What he found, James Joule found that the amount of heat, the cyclic integral of dQ is found to be proportional to the cyclic integral of dW. It means, now this is a very important statement, And let me tell you that this Joule's experiment and the outcomes of the Joule's experiment has laid down the foundation stone for the first law of thermodynamics. And that is the reason this particular experiment and this equation, what are the outcomes of these equations that we are going to see, are being very important from thermodynamics perspective. Now, the outcomes of the Joule's experiment was that whatever the work he is transferring and whatever the heat energy transfer of heat is taking place over here, they are related in this way. Delta Q is proportional to the cyclic integral of dQ is proportional to the cyclic integral of dW. Now, this dQ is what the heat transfer taking place, and dW is what the transfer of work that we are transferring from potential energy into the mechanical work. So, out of now why cyclic integral? Cyclic integral means what? For a complete cycle. It's not for one particular process, it is for the complete process. Whereas this law, the first law of thermodynamics, can be applied for the non-cyclic process also, that we will see it afterwards. But at the beginning, James Joule applied that, took that value of dQ and dW for an entire cyclic process. So, cyclic integral of dQ is proportional to cyclic integral of dW. That's what the outcome of James Joule. Right? Now, to remove this proportionality sign, he brought a constant, and that constant is the cyclic integral of dQ is equals to, he brought a constant, say it is 1 by j into the cyclic integral of dW. So, the same equation I can write down, the cyclic integral of dW is equals to this j into the cyclic integral of dQ, where this term j is being very important, and that James Joule named it as the mechanical equivalent of heat. Mechanical equivalent of heat, and its value is found to be equals to, it is 4.187. James Joule named this constant as the mechanical equivalent of heat. Let me tell you why it is mechanical equivalent of heat. Since with there of this equation, it is being clear that this equation has straightforward equated the mechanical work as well as the heat energy, and there is one multiplying factor is there, only one multiplying factor. It means that whatever dW is, dW, these terms are analogous, these are similar. The dW work done is same as that of dQ. It means that whatever the SI unit of this work done, same will be the unit of this one. Whatever the dimensions of work done, same will be the dimensions of dQ. It means what? The heat energy dQ has the same units, same dimensions as that of the mechanical work. It means that dQ has to be a form of energy. The only difference is, then the time before James Joule, the unit used for the measurement of heat was not joule, it was the calorie. For to convert that calorie into the equivalent amount of SI unit, or say whatever the unit you are following, he brought a constant, and that is equal to J, whose value is equal to 4.187. 4.187. If you want to have the SI unit for that, I will say J will be equals to, let me rewrite it again. This J, James Joule's constant, that is mechanical equivalent of heat, it is the ratio of the cyclic integral of dW divided by the cyclic integral of dQ. So its SI unit will be joule per calorie. Joule per calorie. Right? And its value is J is equals to, it is 4.187 joule per calorie. Right? Actually, there is no meaning in that unit, since that J is simply the multiplying factor which has to be multiplied to the heat energy, so as to convert that heat energy from calorie to the joule, since joule is what? The SI unit used for the measurement of energy. Next, it was, after James Joule, he named it as mechanical equivalent of heat, but after James Joule, the scientists named that constant J as the Joule's constant, and today we say Joule's constant is equal to 4.187. So the right side of this board totally gives you the outcomes of the Joule's experiment, and this particular equation has laid down the foundation stone for the first law of thermodynamics that we have already discussed. Now let us see what is this first law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics, say the conclusion of Joule's experiment and from Joule's experiment, first law of thermodynamics. First law of thermodynamics. Now, let me first of all take down the outcomes of the Joule's experiment. Joule's experiment showed that cyclic integral of dq is proportional to cyclic integral of dw. Then for to remove this proportionality sign, he brought a constant, and that is what the Joule's, we say it as the Joule's constant, and the Joule's constant is J. But the Joule's constant is simply to convert that heat energy dq into the equivalent unit, just it is a multiplying factor. If I take down this dq also in terms of the same unit, the unit of dq and unit of dw as the same, then I can write down the cyclic integral of dq is equals to the cyclic integral of dw. And hence, if I take down this dw over the right side, the left side, what I will get is the cyclic integral of dq minus cyclic integral of dw is equals to 0. And finally, I can write down the cyclic integral of dq minus dw is equals to 0. And this is what the first law of thermodynamics. It's not the actual final statement, but the outcome of Joule's experiment and the first law of thermodynamics derived on the basis of that one is over here. The cyclic integral of dq minus dw is equal to 0. Whereas we are going to see there is a modification, there is one more modification into that statement. What is that modification? That we will see in the first corollary of first law of thermodynamics, right? But as of now, we will consider this as the first law of thermodynamics, right? What modifications are there into this law, we will see it afterwards. The meaning of this statement is, if you take down the cyclic integral for one particular system for the entire cycle, and the cyclic integral of heat transfer to that system minus the work transfer to that system, the difference will be equal to 0. So that's what the first law of thermodynamics is. Now let us see first corollary of that one. The first corollary of the first law of thermodynamics defines the term internal energy. And that term internal energy is nothing but the difference in the heat transfer and the work transfer for that particular system for a complete cycle. How it is? Let us see. First law, of thermodynamics. Corollary 1. And that defines, as I just told you, that first law of thermodynamics and the corollary 1 of that defines the internal energy. It defines internal energy. Now what is this internal energy? The corollary 1 says that the difference of heat transfer and work transfer for a cyclic process for a system is nothing but the change in internal energy of that system. I repeat, the difference in heat transfer and work transfer for a complete cycle is equals to change in the internal energy, that is delta U. So that's what the corollary number 1. Now we will see what is the proof behind that, how to prove it. Let us prove this statement. Now consider there is a arrangement over here, say PV variation of a thermodynamic system. I am going to show you. Say this is the state 1, and a thermodynamic system is having state 1 at the beginning, and it is going to follow one particular process, and the process is, say, over here. This is 1 to 2, and that process is following a path A. A is the path followed by the process. 1A2 is one thermodynamic process, and after reaching at point 2, the thermodynamic state is again following one more process, and it is coming back to the same initial state, that is state 1, but not following the path A, but the path B. Say this is the path B. This is the path B. I repeat, there is a thermodynamic system which is at the state 1, defined by point 1 over here on PV diagram. The thermodynamic system undergoes a thermodynamic process, and that process is represented by 1A2, and the final state of the thermodynamic system is defined by point 2 over here on PV diagram. From point 2, the system is following one more process and coming back to the original state 1, but not following the path A, but following another path like B. Okay. Next, same system, once again it is going to follow one more cyclic process. By the way, this is a cyclic process. Since this is the first process, process number 1A2 is the first process, and 2B1 is the second process. And if you check out, the initial state of the first process and the final state of the last process are being the same, so it is a cyclic process. Next, the same system is going to follow one more cyclic process, and that cyclic process has the first path same, that is 1A2, but while returning to the original state, it is following one more path apart from A and B, and that path is, let us say, it is C over here. This is the path C. This is the path C. But finally it is coming to the same initial state number 1. So if this is the case, then let us check out what will happen if we apply the first law of thermodynamics. That is not this law. The first law, we defined it in a way that the cyclic integral of dq minus dw over a complete cycle is equal to 0. That's what the first law, that the outcome of the Joule's experiment, and this we are going to apply to one cyclic process. The first cyclic process is 1A2 2B1. This is the one cycle. For this cycle we are going to apply this law, and then next we are going to apply the same law to one more cycle, and the next cycle is 1A2 and 2C1, and let us see what will happen. Now if I check out this part, I would like to apply this. Let us apply this. Apply it to the cycle 1A2, 1A2 and 2B1. So to this cycle. So if I apply this equation to the first cycle 1A2 and 2B1, then what I will have is the cyclic integral of dq minus dw is equals to 0. It has to be 0. Now if I apply it for the entire cycle, then I need to apply this equation to this process 1A2 at first and then to 2B1 second. How it is? Then I can write down integral of dq minus dw for the process. For which process? For the process 1A2, for the process 1 to 2, but 1 to 2 can be this process, can be this process, can be this process. So we need to define the path also. So 1A2 is the process, 1A2. So the integral of dq minus dw from 1 to 2 by the path A. Now this is not yet completed. Since this is one, we have applied this to only one process. It is not yet cyclic. So second process also we need to apply, plus cyclic integral of dq minus dw from point 2 to 1, but by what path? For the path B. So 2b1, and that is equal to 0. That is equal to 0. So this we have applied to the first cycle. Then apply cyclic integral of dq minus dw as equal to 0 to what? To next cycle 1a2c1 to 1a2c1. So to this cycle, if I apply this law to the second cycle, that is 1a, 2 and 2ca, then it can be written as integral of dq minus dw for the process 1a2. So it will be 1a2 plus integral of, it is again dq minus dw, but for what process? For the process 2c1. So it is 2c21, and that is equal to 0. Now say this, I have named it as equation number 1, this is equation number 2. Check out this one. This equation, that is integral of cyclic integral of dq minus dw is equal to 0. We have applied this equation to the cycle 1a 2b1, and we got this equation number 1. Then we applied the same equation, that is in cyclic integral of dq minus dw as equal to 0 to the cycle 1a2c1, to this cycle 1a2c1, and we got this equation number 2. Now let's have one operation. Say equation 1 minus 2. Let's have the subtraction of these two terms. So let us subtract equation number 2 from equation number 1. So what we will have is, let me rewrite it, integral of dq minus dw from the process 1a to 2 plus integral of dq minus dw from 2b1 minus this term integral of dq minus dw from the state 1a2, and the minus next term, this is minus of integral of dq minus dw from the state 2c1, and that is equal to 0. So that's what the subtraction is, and you can see that this term integral of dq minus dw from 1a to 2, integral of dq minus dw from 1a to 2, it has a negative sign. So this term and this term will get cancelled. So what we will have is integral of dq minus dw from 2b1 minus integral of dq minus dw from 2c1, and that is equal to 0. It means that integral of dq minus dw from 2b1, that is equals to integral of dq minus dw from 2c1. Now this last statement is very important, and if you try to understand the terms over there, and especially the path followed by the processes, two processes. See, what is this term? This is difference of heat transfer and work transfer taking place during this process. What is this term? This is the difference of heat transfer and work transfer taking place during this process. Now let us check out what are these two processes. Process 2b1, you can see process 2 point is over here, B is over here, and 1. So it is the process, this one, this is the process 2b1. The process 2b1 and the integral of dq minus dw, the difference of heat transfer and work transfer for the process 2b1 I have represented over here, is equals to integral of dq minus dw, that is integral of heat transfer minus work transfer for the process 2c1. Now what is that process 2c1? You can see 2c to 1. So it is over here, it is this process 2c1. So if you check out this term dq minus dw, it is being the same, the difference of heat transfer and work transfer taking place during this process and during this process are being the same. What does it mean? See, this is one particular physical quantity. Since dq we have already considered that as it is not a kind of fluid but it is a kind of energy. So it is one physical quantity. This is work done, it means it is another physical quantity. So difference of these two physical quantities has to be another physical quantity, right? Now this is one physical quantity and this is second physical quantity, and for one particular process it is same whether the process is following the path B or following the path C, or also we can prove that even if it is following the path D like this, even if the process is following the path like E like this. So for all these cases, integral of dq minus dw will be the same. It means that the magnitude of integral of dq minus dw depends only upon the initial state 2 and the final state 2, and it is not dependent upon the path followed by the system, whether it is following the process B or C or D or E or say even any other random path it is going to follow. For every case, the difference of heat transfer and work transfer will be the same for every possible process, and it depends only upon the end state 1 and 2, and doesn't depend upon the path or so the process followed, the path followed by the process, right? Now if it is, then I can write down, see this is one difference, this is difference, okay. So I can write down the cyclic integral of dq minus dw is equals to, now there is a change in the heat transfer and change in work transfer, and the cyclic integral of that difference over an entire cycle is nothing but it is one more form of energy, and we say it as the total energy delta E, total change in energy. But the total energy consists of the internal energy, that is due to the virtue of its temperature, then it consists of the kinetic energy, the potential energy. So I would like to write down that over here, this is also equals to delta PE plus delta KE plus delta U. Remember this, I mean I don't know whether it is readable or not, this is delta U. So delta E, let me rewrite it, this is nothing but our delta E, that is change in total energy, it is nothing but change in potential energy plus change in kinetic energy plus change in the internal energy. So out of that, if we are considering a thermodynamic system, maybe like a boiler, a pressure cooker, a turbine, a compressor, an engine, mostly the potential energy of the system doesn't change. For example, a typical example, if you take down a pressure cooker and put it onto the gas, once it starts to heat, whether the potential energy of the system is going to change, whether the pressure cooker is going to get lifted up or going to come down while it is get heated, it is not. Another example for say like a compressor, while you are compressing it, whether you are hand pump or say a reciprocating compressor, large compressor driven by some IC engine or say electrical motor, whether the potential energy of that compressor, potential energy means what? It is measured in terms of some height. So it is going to change. Is it going to change? It is not. Same is the case for the kinetic energy. Kinetic energy of most of the thermodynamic system do not change. So we can straightforward neglect these two terms, can be equated to 0. And finally, what we will get is, we are going to get the equation that is delta U is equals to cyclic integral of dq minus dw, and this is what the first law of thermodynamics is, and this delta U is nothing but the change in internal energy and can be represented as U2 minus U1. Right? have one more sight onto the entire expression. Well, let us go ahead for the next corollary of the first law of thermodynamics, or say the Joule's experiment. So, the corollary number 2 is that, corollary number 2 of first law of thermodynamics is, it says that for an isolated system, the change in internal energy is always 0. That is, delta U, change in internal energy is 0 for isolated system. For an isolated system. Now let us see what it is. For an isolated system, if I take down a system to be like this, and if I isolate it from the surrounding, say it's over here, this is isolation provided. So first of all, isolated system means it is not simply the closed one, but totally insulated from the surrounding in such a way that no heat transfer can take place, no work transfer can take place. So this is the system. So from system to surrounding, how much is delta Q? Delta Q over here, it has to be equal to 0 since we have insulated it. So no heat can come out of the system, no heat can go into the system. Next, how much is the work transfer taking place over here? Delta W, obviously that is also equal to 0. No work transfer is taking place. So this is an isolated system. This is an isolated system. Now for this isolated system, delta Q is 0, delta W is also 0, right? I mean, this is the finite change in the finite transfer change in the heat, finite change in the work, or you can take down differential form also, that is dQ or say dW also. Doesn't matter, it will have the same meaning. If you integrate it, you will get delta and delta Q and delta W. Now if I apply the first law of thermodynamics to this particular system, what is the first law of thermodynamics? We have seen that delta U is equals to cyclic integral of dQ minus dW. So if I simplify it, I can write down cyclic integral of dQ minus cyclic integral of dW. So this delta U is equals to cyclic integral of dQ means what? There will be finite difference in the finite heat transfer minus finite work transfer. But we know that for isolated system, delta Q is 0, delta W is 0. So this is 0, this is 0. So this U, delta U, finally this delta U will be equal to 0. What is this delta U? This delta U is nothing but change in the internal energy. U2 minus U1 is equal to 0. And hence I can write down U1 is equals to U2, and that is what the corollary number 2 is. Delta U is equal to 0 for an isolated system. Delta U is equal to 0 for an isolated system. Let us check out the next corollary, corollary number 3, and it defines a really very wonderful concept, that is PMM1. Corollary number 3 is PMM1 cannot exist. or it is impossible to construct PMM1. Now, what is this PMM1? Let me elaborate it. PMM1 is nothing but perpetual motion machine of first kind. This is the first type of PMM1, that is perpetual motion machine. Now, what is this perpetual motion machine? It is a machine which continuously keeps on producing some work output without consuming or without absorbing any kind of heat energy or any other form of energy. That is, if this is PMM1, this is PMM1, then it is continuously giving out some work done, whereas there is no heat input to this. Q input is equal to 0, but W is not equal to 0. It means that, in a very simple language I would like to explain, perpetual motion machine of first kind is a machine which continuously produces some work output without consuming any kind of input energy to it. For example, you are having a bike, you are having a petrol engine. If your petrol engine is PMM1, then I will say it should continuously keeps on running, continuously keeps on producing work done without consuming any petrol, without consuming any energy. Is it possible? It is not possible. Electrical fan. If the fan is rotating continuously and producing the mechanical work continuously, endless, without consuming any electricity, without consuming any kind of energy, that is what PMM1. Is it possible? It is obviously not possible. So, any such device which continuously keeps on producing some work done, non-zero work done, finite work done, without consuming any kind of energy, that is known to be what? PMM1. And the first law of thermodynamics says, or say the third corollary of first law of thermodynamics says that PMM1 cannot exist, or say PMM1, it is impossible to construct PMM1, that is perpetual motion machine of first kind, right? Now, in the way in which we can prove the PMM1 cannot exist, we can also prove that the converse of PMM1 is also not possible. That is, what is converse of PMM1? Converse of PMM1. Converse of PMM1 is nothing but any machine which is continuously absorbing some energy, I mean this is non-zero, but giving no work output or say no energy transfer. I mean any device which is absorbing the energy, some sort of energy, but not giving out any other form of energy, that is also not possible. For example, if you're select take on the same example, the petrol engine. If petrol engine is continuously absorbing petrol, so either it has to give some mechanical work or say some heat transfer, he has to transfer some heat to the surrounding. He is simply, that device or say the machine is simply consuming the energy continuously without emitting out any other form of energy to the surrounding. That is also not possible, that is impossible. So, if the corollary 3 says that PMM1, it is impossible to construct PMM1, then the converse of PMM1, that is also true. That is, it is impossible to produce any such device which can continuously keep on absorbing one form of energy without giving out any other form of energy out of it. So that is converse of PMM1, and that is also, I mean, that is not possible to achieve. So this is all about today's lecture. I think today we should stop over here. Thank you.